Good morning and welcome back to Flashback Friday here on Gaming with ADHD. Today we are going to take a look at a noir detective game set in the not too distant future, Android. Now this isn't Android Netrunner or Android Los Angeles or Mainframe or Infiltration or New Angeles. This is just plain old Android. And this is the first game that we saw the Android universe from Fantasy Flight Games. Now, as you know, I like to tell a little bit of a story about why I have something in my collection, why I'm talking about it. And about 16 years ago, so before this game had even launched, it came out in 2008, I was actually in a group that was doing playtests for different games or expansions from Fantasy Flight. And I almost got to play test this one. And so it kind of caught my attention, and I've been a fan of it ever since. It's a cyberpunk setting, and but with a little bit more of a hopeful flair is what I would say about it. And when the game actually came out, it unfortunately was not in the budget, so I never actually picked it up. Until a few years ago, I was in our local used bookstore, and there were two copies of the game. One was, for some reason, priced higher than the other, so I opted to get the cheaper one. And when I opened it, I was actually kind of surprised because it was basically brand new. It hadn't been opened. And so today I wanted to actually do a retro unboxing of this game. It's not entirely, unmolested. I did open it up and look at the game and look at some of the components, but all of the tokens and pieces for the game are unpunched. So you're still going to see more or less what it was like, when you purchased it brand new. Now, couple things to keep in mind. This game is out of print. Unfortunately, Fantasy Flight has not seen fit to reprint the game. But overall, it really sets the stage and the tone for this universe that they've actually gone on to do a lot with. Probably next to Shadowrun is one of my favorite settings for a cyberpunk type story. So with that said, let's open it up and take a look at what we get inside. So unfortunately, my box does have a little bit of shelf wear here and on the corners, but overall it's still in some decent condition. It's a little bit thinner cardboard than I would like, especially for the actual weight of this game. So it's pretty heavy for the amount of cardboard that they're giving you. But it's it's definitely got that early 2000s art style that you would see from Fantasy Flight, and they definitely just kind of capture that feel across the entire thing. So like I said, it's a bit of a noir kind of detective story. And there's a lot of things that they did that I thought were really unique. So first off, there's no set scenarios. They have some different murders that you need to solve, but they actually designed the game in such a way that you can replay the scenarios very easily. I'll talk about that a little bit. I have only gotten to play the game once, so I'm going to have lots of inaccuracies in it, but we'll go through it as we're looking at the different components. So obviously the first piece is our rulebook. It is pretty thick at about 48 pages. Okay. But again, in that early 2000s style that you would see from Fantasy Flight. So lots of art, lots of diagrams. This is not a very simple game because there are a lot of things going on. So they break down the components. One thing that I do like about Fantasy Flight is they break down what the component is and also what it does, why you have it. So like it talks about the different evidence tokens, the different lead markers, testimony, physical or document, the suspect sheets, and so it's going to tell you what the components are for, not just, oh, you get 20 of these, because that doesn't necessarily make any sense, especially if you haven't read the instructions yet. So, obviously lots of extra art. This really is a game world in and of itself. They've since moved on to putting it into their Genesis role-playing game. They dramatically expanded the universe with Netrunner. They've got a couple other board games. So all of that stems from this initial game. And really, their art and their production values, especially for the time, are top notch. I mean, I remember Fantasy Flight would put out a game and I would pretty much have to buy it. Like it was a guaranteed buy. Not as much anymore. Maybe that's just changing tastes or changing styles, but it was definitely a thing back in the day. This real quick is I like this because this is actually the art from the game board, but without all of the extra bits on that. I actually really like that they included that here. You have the moon colonies, the city of New Angeles, and then here you have the beanstalk, or space elevator, as it were. A couple other charts, and then an index of the contents. All right. We then have our different characters. So everybody's going to get a character card. Gives a little bit of come on, focus. There we go. So a little bit of background about the character, where they start, and any items that they're going to start with. And then each player also is going to get a card for different strategies. What are they strong at? What are they weak at? Just some advice on how to play the character, which I think is very interesting. Just because that means these characters are very unique and very different. Then also gives strategies for how to play against the other players, because basically it's you have the murder, and then you have up to 5 different detectives trying to solve the murder at the same time. So we've got Louis Blaine, Raymond Flint, Caprice Nisei, Floyd 2X3A7C, and Rachel Beckman. One thing I will point out is, you've got the 2 pieces of art. You've got one where they're happy, one where there's obviously some sort of trauma. Each character also gets their own story. So you have different side objectives that you're trying to solve for while you're trying to solve the murder. So something that's happening in your own personal life that you have to adapt to at the same time that you're trying to figure out, who committed this crime. All right, you then have different murder cards. So there are 6 different cases. And one thing that's kind of nice is, so there are 6 different suspects in the game. And based on the number of players, you will put that many suspects out. So if you're playing with 3 players, you would put in 1 suspect per player plus 1. So for 3 players, you'd put out the first 4 suspects. And versus, each case, as you can see, the different suspects, change as far as their order of priority. So, it makes it for better scaling, and then also better replayability. Because one of the things about how the game plays is it's not fixed as to who the murderer of the story is. As you go through the game and you look for clues, as a player, you actually get to influence who the player is. Part of that is because you're actually given some cards at the beginning where you have to, where it's who you think the primary suspect is, and if that person turns out to be the murderer, you get a lot of points. And then there's also somebody who you think is innocent, and if you manage to keep them from being the murderer, then you gain points. So you can actually influence who the culprit is throughout the game. But that also means that you can come back and you can play it again and not necessarily know how the game is going to turn out. So that's kind of interesting. This is the timesheet. So each player would get this on their turn, and then they have a certain amount of time that they can use. It's not always 13, and that's basically how many different actions they can take on their turn. Let's see. It is the same thing on both sides. You then have the different suspects. Now, another nice thing that they did with the suspects is there is physical evidence, testimonial evidence, and documentary evidence. And so versus this suspect, physical evidence is going to be the strongest against her. So you'll be able to get more points towards making her the culprit if you get more physical evidence. Whereas if you get documentary evidence, so videotapes or other photographs, things like that, if you get that against her, it doesn't score you as many points. So one of the things as you're playing the game is you get these clues. You don't want to, if this is your primary suspect, you don't want to just start putting everything there, because then everybody figures out who it is and then can start working against you towards that. So it takes a lot of kind of secret maneuvering. So it's like, I'm going to put some here, but then I'm going to put some more over here, just to kind of mix it up so that hopefully yours ends up with more clue tokens than the others. So we've got Sergeant Deja Thoris, Eve 5VA 3TC, Mark Henry, Noise, Thomas Haas, and Vinny the Strangler. All right, now this is actually the top right corner of the game board. I'm going to leave it in the box to talk about it for a second, because this is one of the other interesting things about Android. So in Android, you have this puzzle going on here. I forget exactly what they call it the conspiracy. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to link these different organizations to the actual conspiracy to commit this crime. So throughout the game, you're going to get different puzzle pieces. So this is actually, a puzzle piece sticking up from the board. I don't know if you can tell that very well on my camera. And you will get other puzzle pieces that you connect to it and then build off of it to then try and connect different points. And I was reading something from the developer where basically he said he when he designs games, he tries to deal with paychecks and jackpots. And what he means by that is that during the game, you're going to get things that will get you points towards victory. And so he considers those paychecks, just those things that you can regularly do as you play the game to score points. But he also tries to put something in at the end of the game where, okay, if you can pull this off, you're going to get a bunch of points that are going to help you win the game. And he calls that a jackpot. So this All of this gives you points at the end of the game based on how many links from different sides of the puzzle are you able to connect to the central conspiracy. So that's your jackpot to get some extra points at the end of the game to hopefully pull out the win. The game is based on victory points. It's not whoever solves or gets the correct murderer. It's strictly who scores the most points. So the way that happens, and I apologize, but we will go out to my infamously small recording area. All right, actually, I'm going to show one portion. So this is the lower left section of the game board. And so you have these different locations. Some are, like the New Angeles Police Department, the Earthside Tenements, the Memories of Green. But then you also have other minor locations that you can visit. Let's see here. We can open it this way. So then we get, more. Now, these are all Earthside locations. So when you're traveling, you can only go from one Earthside location to another. We'll talk about traveling here in a second. I think they did something really interesting for that as well. But so when you want to move, then you need to travel to the Beanstalk, which is over here. This is called the Midway, which is the midpoint of the Beanstalk. And basically you're traveling up the space elevator to then get something, or to get on another transport to then go over to the moon. So the other top two sections are these, which represent moon locations. So whenever you're traveling between these locations, you can only go between these unless you then go back down the Beanstalk to Earth. So you will have to travel between all of the locations. So I think that that makes for a very interesting dynamic, because there are going to be clues all over the place, and you can't just leave them, leave them unattended. But it very much gives you that feel of you're, sort of like I'm going to call it Blade Runner, where he's having to travel around the cities, going to different locations, going to different companies to try and get the clues as to what's happening. And this really does capture that feel, gives it a very very large feel to traveling around. So I apologize for not being able to show this off very well, but like I said, my infamously undersized recording area. All right, so we've then got our sheets of tokens. So we've got 4 sheets of tokens, and actually we're going to start here. Let me zoom in a little bit. So here at the top, we have 5 different arcs. Now, these are the vehicles for the different investigators, and they're different sizes. I believe these 3 are about the same size. These 2 are a bit larger. But when you want to travel between 2 different locations, you will put one end of the arc at the location you're at, and then you can travel to any location within the radius of this particular arc. So if you need to get to a location, but your arc isn't big enough, well, then you're going to have to you're going to have to spend 2 of your units of time to travel, to one location that's closer and then to your final destination. So I think that was really interesting, and a very, very interesting mechanic. But then we've got all sorts of tokens for the different players. Sometimes you'll have to mark something on the board. So you'll put these tokens out saying, okay, this character needs to go over here. You then have different tokens for clues, for victims, for basically needing to get different pieces of information. Most of them are double-sided. Some of them are concealed so that they are randomized. or when the character is eliminated. This token right here is to denote where the body is located. All right, so that's our first sheet. We then have this sheet of puzzle pieces. Obviously, one has already been punched out because that's the one that ends up on the board. It is actually glued in place. If you obtain a copy of this, do not try to remove it. It's supposed to be there. Pro tip. There were a lot of problems when the game first came out. People were trying to take it off, and it didn't end well. But these are the different puzzle pieces that you're going to use to link up that conspiracy. The backside, they are different types. Again, I only played this once, so I do not remember exactly what these are for, but you will organize these into different stacks, which you will draw from randomly in order to start making those connections. So that's our second piece of cardboard. Got more clue tokens, ID tokens. Again, typical Fantasy Flight, content. We've got an even bigger car down here. More tokens, more clues, more evidence. So, first player marker. Anyways. All right. We've got some standees for the player characters. These are just, generic plastic standees. So, enough for one for each player. We then have a mountain of cards. And I want to play this, so I'm busting it open. They've only been sealed for 14 years. Mistakes were made. And my wife seems a little upset over that. She's in the background. All right, so these are the cards that you would get for, okay, I think this person is innocent. These are dealt out randomly at the beginning of the game. There are matching cards. There's actually one more because obviously there are 6 suspects and there's only 5 right here. So there's one more. Plus there's one for there's one more for thinking somebody's innocent, and then there's a set of 6 cards for thinking someone is guilty. All right, so these are then story cards for the individual investigators. They've got their art on the back. So different points based on if you complete them. Different things that you have to do. There's also different stories, based on the game. So, again, lots of that, all based on the individual investigators. So, I won't force you to look at all of that. All right, there's our last innocent card. And then we have the 6 guilty cards. So obviously 15 points if you find the guilty person. There's an interesting rule because they are dealt out randomly. You can end up with both, that you think the person is guilty and you think the person is innocent. And that means you are obsessed with that person. And that will, there are additional rules for that, basically, I forget exactly what it does, but, basically you can get some bonus points because you are absolutely obsessed with this particular person. And we're able to find them guilty. So again, we've got more story cards for these characters, story cards that go the negative route. So I believe it's called the light cards and the dark cards. Dark cards being, when their story goes bad. Light cards when the story is going good. All right. Got a few more of the dark story. Let's put that all together. All right, so again, kind of typical Fantasy Flight for back in those days. Lots of cards, lots of tokens. But I really like how they develop this. You've got the stories that you're working on. In addition to trying to solve the murder. So, like I said, I've only gotten to play it once. We played half the game because my wife needed to go to bed. But it was an absolute blast. Fully enjoyed it. Let's see. So, yeah, I think I will end it there. Because otherwise it's just looking at a bunch of boring cards. But basically what I would say is, if you get a chance, I highly recommend that you give this game a try. To me, it was a very unique experience. I am a little disappointed that I have only played it the one time using somebody else's copy and not played it with my own yet. But it was fun. It was nice to see somebody trying something a little different. And for 14 years ago, I think the game has really held up. I played it the one time I played it was about 2 years ago, and it was like I said, it was a fantastic experience. So I hope you enjoyed this little flashback. Even though I couldn't give you the greatest review of the game, but it is kind of fun to be able to look inside some of these old games that haven't been punched yet. Obviously, by this point, usually they've been punched and organized or pieces lost, etc. But regardless, check out Android if you get the chance. But I thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please do give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe. I am putting out at least a few videos a week about all sorts of different tabletop gaming topics. And I'd love for you to come along and see what I have to share. So thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.